Imagine if the government had ignored evidence linking smoking to cancer. Now picture this. The Harris-Biden administration is essentially doing the same with wireless radiation. Despite compelling research linking radiofrequency radiation to serious health risks, including cancer, they've ignored a court order to update outdated safety guidelines and have even cut funding for essential cancer research. This article explores the science, the stakes, and why public health needs to take precedence over industry influence. What is wireless radiation, and why should we care? Wireless radiation, or RF radiation, is the type of electromagnetic energy emitted by devices like cell phones, Wi-Fi routers, and other wireless gadgets. It's part of our daily lives, making modern conveniences possible, but at what cost? Most of us use these devices without questioning their safety. However, a growing body of scientific research is uncovering potential health risks associated with RF exposure, especially for vulnerable groups like children. The different types of EMFs. Electromagnetic fields come in two types, ionizing and non-ionizing. Ionizing radiation, like X-rays, has enough energy to remove tightly bound electrons from atoms and molecules, which can damage DNA. Non-ionizing radiation, including RF radiation from cell phones and Wi-Fi, has traditionally been considered safe since it doesn't produce heat or break chemical bonds. However, new research is challenging this assumption, showing biological impacts even at low exposure levels. Outdated guidelines. Why are we stuck in the 1990s? In 1996, the Federal Communications Commission established guidelines for RF radiation exposure. These guidelines are now almost 30 years old and based primarily on thermal effects, the idea that radiation is only harmful if it heats up tissue. This assumption ignores non-thermal biological effects, like DNA damage and oxidative stress, that modern studies have linked to RF exposure. Why haven't the guidelines changed? In 2021, the U.S. Court of Appeals ordered the FCC to revisit its outdated safety standards, following evidence of non-thermal risks associated with RF radiation. However, the FCC has failed to act, and the Biden-Harris administration has not pushed for compliance. Critics argue that industry influence is at play, with powerful telecommunications companies benefiting from lenient regulations. The real health risks. What science says about wireless radiation. The health effects of wireless radiation are not hypothetical. They're increasingly backed by science. While regulatory bodies continue to rely on outdated research, recent studies suggest a much more complex relationship between RF radiation and health risks. National Toxicology Program, NTP study. The National Toxicology Program's multi-year study is one of the most comprehensive assessments of RF radiation risks to date. The NTP found clear evidence linking high levels of RF exposure to malignant tumors in the brain and heart of male rats. This study raised significant concerns, especially for young children who may be more susceptible to long-term RF exposure from devices used daily. Ramazzini Institute study. Another major study conducted by the Ramazzini Institute in Italy replicated the NTP's findings. Their research also found increased cancer risks, supporting the argument that RF radiation has carcinogenic potential, even at lower levels similar to those emitted by cell towers. Why children are more vulnerable to wireless radiation. Children's developing brains and bodies make them particularly susceptible to environmental toxins. RF radiation penetrates deeper into children's tissues than adults, and studies show they absorb significantly more radiation per kilogram of body weight. Increased risk for brain cancer. Studies have shown that prolonged exposure to RF radiation increases the risk of brain cancers like gliomas. This is especially concerning for children, whose skulls are thinner and whose brains are still developing, allowing for deeper penetration of radiation and potentially higher health risks. Behavioral and cognitive concerns. Beyond cancer, there is evidence that RF exposure could impact neurodevelopment, leading to issues like memory problems, attention deficits, and behavioral changes. Given that children today are exposed to wireless devices at a very young age, the potential for long-term developmental effects is a significant concern that warrants further investigation and regulatory caution. Ignoring the evidence, how the Harris-Biden administration has failed us. The 2021 court ruling mandated the FCC to update RF safety guidelines based on current science. Yet despite this clear directive, the Harris-Biden administration has done nothing to hold the FCC accountable. Additionally, funding for critical research on RF radiation has been cut, effectively silencing scientific investigation into this public health issue. Why was NTP funding cut? The National Toxicology Program, or NTP, was leading critical cancer research on RF radiation, but the Harris-Biden administration cut its funding. This decision has been criticized as a capitulation to corporate interests, prioritizing the wireless industry over public health. Ending this research not only stalls scientific progress but also keeps the public in the dark about potential health risks. The influence of the wireless industry. The telecommunications industry wields significant power, influencing policy decisions at the highest levels. This influence has hindered meaningful updates to safety guidelines, leaving the public, and especially children, at risk. The bigger picture: how RF radiation could affect society. RF radiation impacts aren't limited to physical health. The biological disruptions caused by EMFs may extend to mental and emotional health, impacting society as a whole. Cognitive effects and social implications. RF radiation may disrupt the brain's bioelectric processes, potentially contributing to cognitive decline and mental health disorders like anxiety and depression. This could have far-reaching effects on society, influencing productivity, mental well-being, and even behavior. Potential impact on reproductive health. There is also evidence suggesting that RF radiation may affect fertility and reproductive health. Studies have shown decreased sperm quality and viability associated with long-term cell phone exposure. This is concerning for both current and future generations, adding another layer to the public health risks associated with RF radiation. Leaders who will take action. Support for RFK Jr. and Donald Trump. For those concerned about the health risks of RF radiation, there are leaders committed to addressing this issue. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has long advocated for stricter RF safety standards and increased funding for independent research, while former President Donald Trump has shown a commitment to enforcing court rulings that protect public health. Electing leaders who prioritize science over industry influence is essential to addressing these risks. The path forward: what needs to change? To protect public health, immediate action is needed. Here's what can be done. 1. Update FCC guidelines. The FCC must update its RF safety guidelines to reflect current scientific understanding, accounting for both thermal and non-thermal effects. 2. Restore funding for independent research. Reinstating funding for the National Toxicology Program and other independent research initiatives is crucial for further understanding the long-term health effects of RF radiation. 3. Enforce transparency in policymaking. Ensuring that public health policies are made transparently, without undue industry influence, is essential. This includes requiring lobbyists to disclose their contributions and limiting the wireless industry's influence on regulatory bodies like the FCC. 4. Educate the public. Raising awareness about safe device usage can reduce exposure to RF radiation. Public health campaigns on safe distances, device usage limitations, and protective measures can empower people to make informed decisions. Final thoughts: demand accountability, vote for change. Ignoring RF radiation risks is no longer an option. The evidence is clear. Exposure to RF radiation has both thermal and non-thermal effects, which could impact public health in ways we're just beginning to understand. The Harris-Biden administration's refusal to act on these issues places corporate profits over public health, leaving children and families at risk. If we want to protect our children and future generations, we need leaders who will prioritize science and public health. The choice is clear. Elect leaders who will enforce regulatory updates, fund essential research, and safeguard our health. Call to action. Take a stand for public health. Protecting our families from RF radiation requires collective action. Vote for leaders who are committed to addressing these health risks, and support organizations advocating for safer wireless technology. For more resources on RF safety and how to protect your family, visit RF Safe.